With gaming being the juggernaut it is today, having millions of players, you would think that most people would be getting worse at games. But have you noticed that in reality, so many people are really good at video games now? Like, compared to 10 years ago, it's wild how much better the average player has gotten and how hard some games are to get into. But like, why? Humans definitely haven't evolved so quickly, so what changed? Well, I think at the top level, we've probably gotten a bit better over time with higher prize pools bringing more incentive to grind the game. But I mean, when you compare old StarCraft 2 to now, the top level skill isn't that much higher. But when you're comparing low and mid-level players, like even mid-level League of Legends Season 4 people to, people in League of Legends right now, the skill difference is so insane. Gold players now are way better than a lot of diamond players back in the day, and the average community member just knows so much more and has so much more experience than ever before. I think there's a big reason for why the average player is getting so much better, especially compared to pro players who are kind of stagnating a bit. And that's mainly that in the past, only a few very select people honestly grinded out games. A few small amount of people would go to local tournaments or try to go to these huge events. But now everyone is incentivized to try to unlock rewards, to try to flex with their friends. The culture has kind of completely shifted from what it used to be, where it used to mainly focus completely on just having as much fun with your friends as possible, to now trying to earn points, which isn't the only goal, but is definitely one of the goals. And I mean, once you've grinded one game, in a lot of the cases, that skill will eventually transfer to future games, especially if they're in the same genre. Let's say you're playing a shooter game to a new shooter game. Yeah, a lot of that skill is going to cross the line, and over the years, people are going to get better and better and better at that genre. And in addition to this, I think even across genre, a lot of times there are skills that will still somewhat transfer, such as learning basic positioning or learning how to make better decisions in general. It will make the average player base improve over time as people get better at those general skills. Right now, compared to the past, I think we just have years of compounding game knowledge and skill in a more competitive aspect where people actually care. We can see this with something like League of Legends CSing and items, and then Overwatch positioning. Add those two together, and if you're good at both of those, you're going to be instantly quite good at Deadlock, a completely different game. But the skills definitely do transfer. And as new games come out, people who've been really good and dedicated for games, for decades in the past, well, that old aim, that old skill, the old timing, a lot of those things will apply pretty decently to the future. And I think that people simply didn't have the chance to really do this in the old Xbox 360 days when the consoles were new and when genres were even newer, and you really couldn't rely on old skills to apply to new games nearly as much as you can currently. When we keep in mind how new this hobby is, I think it does kind of make sense how over time people would be getting better and people would be grinding more. And a thing I also want to add to this is that we have the natural, growth of strength and growth of skills that we would have, but also I think a lot of devs realize that, if we create a game that has a ton of grind in it, we can actually get players to get a lot more addicted to improving at this game and spend a lot more time in this game without necessarily having to create a ton of content. And as long as you have very deep mechanics, or at least somewhat deep mechanics, you can have players making their own content. So when you add those two together, I think what it adds up to is basically just people really grinding games now because they're incentivized to. There's actually kind of a reason to do so now. You have fame, you have in-game items, or maybe you just have bragging rights. It could be whatever you want. But, from a business point of view, why would you not push for this? Because it's just tons of gameplay, tons of people potentially buying your skins in the future for really not that much effort. And, as a consumer, well, I think we all kind of fell for the rank grind from the top down. There's a big group of gamers who are really good at games now. Maybe even in some cases a bit too good to play against at least the more casual part of the player base. And I will say that skill-based matchmaking has been quite helpful in some aspects because it makes it that these players that are new won't have to every single game play against someone that is grinding all the time because, after you lose 10 games, you'll finally be hopefully placed against someone that is more similar to where you are. But at the same time, I can see a lot of frustration of newer players feeling like you are so far behind the older ones, feeling like you are grinding out games, but you just keep losing and losing and losing until you finally hit people that are around your skill level. And if that's 30 games deep, that could be extremely obnoxious for people. All these things together make me think that it could be quite obnoxious to get into older games or just into a new game in a genre that already has existed for a long time with a lot of transferable skills. Unless you get matchmade again with brand new people, you will kind of suffer. I feel like it's kind of like you're handing a 5-year-old a controller in Mario Kart while you've been playing it for 20 years. Yeah, they can learn it, but for quite a while, it will definitely be a bit rough for them. A perfect recent example I saw of this was actually Jam learning Rivals 2. Now, This is a bit different than normal because it's not someone that plays no games. Sajam is an experienced fighting game player, plays a lot of them, but he doesn't really play any platform fighting games kind of at all. And watching him was just the weirdest thing for me because he wanted to learn the game naturally. He didn't want to have a ton of guides. He didn't want to have someone come on a stream and just talk to his face and tell him exactly what to do, what was good, what was bad, how to input stuff. He just wanted to play the game and learn on his own. And so many people in chat absolutely hated this because honestly, this isn't really the norm anymore for games. His improvement was quite slow because he had to learn everything himself. And I think for most people, it's just so much more satisfying to see someone go from 0 to hero with godlike coaching in like 3 hours. But just like Sajam, I think a lot of people don't necessarily want to look up coaching right away, or they don't want to look up guides right away. And they just want to play the game the way that it naturally is and learn it slowly over time. But I think that is a shrinking minority. This was all kind of funny for me to watch because I don't do that at all. For every new game, I look up every guide I possibly can. I write out copious notes, I prep so much, and when the game finally comes out, you know I'm looking for those day one guides, trying to improve myself as much as possible. And I think, for some people, they might not want to do that. And that can be hard. And they can feel like they're months behind, even like instantly. But if you do choose to look for that knowledge, you can improve so much faster than ever. And I think a lot of people have chosen to do that. They have chosen to improve so much faster than ever. And I think, guides or tutorials or whatever, I think those are a huge reason why everyone is so good at games now, because they have all this concentrated knowledge all in one place. They don't have to play 800 hours to learn when you're supposed to do this or when you're supposed to do that. They can learn how to do something well before they even touch the game in the first place. For myself, I saw this with something like Age of Empires 4. I had just like 8 hours into the game, but I already hit gold in that game because I looked at a ton of guides. I knew exactly what to build, what order to do, what beat what. It was so much faster than learning the game by itself. Of course, not everyone wants to do that though, but for the people that do, which is I think honestly the majority now, yeah, people are going to be improving very quickly and being a lot better than the majority of players that don't want to do that. The internet just makes everything so much easier to grind gameplay-wise and also just grind, knowledge as a collective. It was really hard in the past to grind when half your games would disconnect, or if you got DDoS all the time like in the old League of Legends, or if you just had to make, 10 people come together and play LAN. But now you can just play whenever you want. A small addition to this is that there's also just a lot easier ways to theorycraft now than in the past and to put ideas to the test. I think, if you're just going into a Discord or Reddit or whatever, you can ask a question, and in a lot of cases, you can get pretty good answers to those questions. And again, that's something that in the past you would have to figure out yourself, which would take forever, but now you can just know. And yeah, that will, as the general player base, make people get a lot better, a lot faster, as we're just kind of democratizing this knowledge and getting everyone better together. My final thing here will be that I think just gaming in general is a more acceptable hobby now, and a lot more people are playing games for a lot more time than in the past. And the most basic thing I can tell you is that the more time you put into games, the better people will be at games. Like, it's kind of as basic as that. And add that to the fact that, getting a job is a little bit harder than it ever has been in the past. And also people have a lot more free time, even with jobs. And you see yourself having a bunch of grinders, having a lot more time to push up the skill curve, help each other improve. And the average player, I think, is just getting better with all that put together. All of that was about multiplayer games. And a quick bonus word on single player games, I think all the skill, precision, and character control that you've had in previous games oftentimes also does apply to future games. But we, as well, with everything else, we have videos telling you exactly what to do, where to go, how to do it, how to beat puzzles. Basically whatever you want, how to have a good build, how to beat hard bosses, and it's just a lot easier for bigger player bases to, choose a boss because there's a lot more knowledge out there and it's a lot more accessible than in the past. So even if people's reactions times haven't really improved that much over time, or our general gaming physicalness hasn't really got much better, I think the shared knowledge definitely has, and thus our ability to confront a challenge has also gone up a lot. Add all of this along with the knowledge that a lot of times guides for games in the past might actually have knowledge that still applies to games that you're playing now in the future. So even if you aren't looking up a guide for this particular game, a guide for a previous game might have somewhat decently applied to the game you're playing now, making it, quite a bit easier, such as Elden Ring, knowing that building HP is pretty broken from Dark Souls. Yeah, it still works in this new game. It makes the game a lot easier. And I think in a lot of games, stuff will apply like that. Stuff that you wouldn't normally figure out naturally, but having someone else tell you it, yeah, it's pretty obvious knowledge that will definitely make games a lot easier for you. But with all that in mind, those are all my own thoughts about if people are just getting too good at games. And in some cases, I think maybe people are getting a bit too good at games, but as well, like, yeah, it's just going to naturally happen over time, especially as people are incentivized to do so. Speaking about getting good though, I have a video right here that you can click on talking about maybe a certain particular group of people that doesn't have to get nearly as good as other people, talking about supports, why they might not necessarily have to grind as much of other players, and why it seems like so many support characters in games ignore skill. If you want to watch that video, give it a click right here, and I hope you all have a wonderful day.